Yeah, thank you for that. That was really interesting. I believe I was asked to say something about what I think are the key challenges for the coming years. And I think that these key challenges will lie in the social realm. Because what started, as has been said, in 2008 as a banking crisis, turned into a financial crisis, a euro crisis. In its wake, we've been dealing with an economic crisis, with failing businesses and receding growth. And now we are gradually entering a new phase, which is the social crisis. Now, this social crisis is, of course, already very real in some of the member states. Spain has an unemployment figure of 25% overall, and half of its young are jobless. In Portugal and Ireland and Italy, employment is up and poverty is up. And, of course, Greece, poor Greece. It really hurts me to hear people say, not least in my own country, the Netherlands, that Greeks are lazy, that they're living off our hard-earned money, when in the social reality, Greece is fast becoming a third world country. Doctors Without Borders have opened posts there. And before long, I think we might be sending food aid to the increasing numbers of destitute poor there. But as long as the populations in the Netherlands, in Germany, in the UK, in Scandinavian countries are largely untouched, the social crisis is not at the top of the EU priority list. These countries are still battling the former battle only. They are concentrating solely on whatever they can think of to regain the trust of the traders in bonds, the traders in the financial fate of states. As long as their populations, or perhaps more accurately, their voters, don't go out into the street and threaten to oust their governments in hope of something better, they don't seem to realize what the gravity of the situation is. They stare at the figures only and forget to look past those figures at the very real social plight of very real people. Now, coming March, at the Spring Council, the government leaders will decide what direction the European economy should take in the coming year. They do this very, very loosely on the basis of the annual growth survey that the European Commission has presented end of last year. And this whole process has very little democratic legitimacy. The European Parliament doesn't have much to say, and nor do the national parliaments. I am the rapporteur of a report of this Parliament on this annual growth survey, so that way we're trying to regain a little bit of influence there. And we will vote on that next week in Strasbourg. I've been already lobbying very hard with the presidency, with different reps, and also with the Commission to try to get some attention from Council for these points. Now, I'd like to say I was very proud that I've gotten the Parliament to prioritize. This is always very difficult. And we came to 5 priorities that we think are now of utmost importance. The first is coherence and ambition. The guidelines for the EU economy should be coherent with the EU 2020 goals. And they should display some coherence between the financial and budgetary goals on the one hand and the social and employment goals on the other hand. And especially in the stronger member states, the ambition should be increased to gain the EU 2020 goals for employment, for innovation, for fighting climate change and for fighting poverty. The Netherlands, for instance, falls short of every single one of these goals, whereas it's the richest of the member states. The second, budgetary leeway to invest in job creation. Let's make working cheaper by shifting the tax burden away from labour and onto financial transactions and environmental use. Let's give those countries who can, that are mostly in the centre, in the north, the opportunity to invest in job creation and thereby perhaps even reversing the monetary flow. The third, ensuring the quality of jobs and preconditions for working. Austerity and growth may never be an excuse to do away with health and safety standards. And work should always lift people out of poverty. If you're going to cut, do not cut things like childcare if you want in a few years that women can fill the gaps left by the aging society. The fourth, tackle youth unemployment. We cannot afford to sink off a whole generation of young people for whom the crisis is not only an individual tragedy, but who are also desperately needed once the aging society starts taking its toll. Let's use this opportunity to school youngsters further as long as there's no jobs, to learn in work situations while making sure they do not fall below the poverty line. And that way we can emerge from the crisis with a stronger workforce instead of rolling into a new one once the aging society starts really hitting. And the fifth is to pay enough attention to those people in poverty with no or limited links to the labour market. Because when asked about their anti-poverty strategy, most member states, or a lot of them at least, only cite their strategies to increase labour participation. But a lot of people living in poverty, like pensioners, like people with a disability, like the illiterate or even unregistered people, they will never be able to get out of poverty by paid work. And they are our most vulnerable citizens and they deserve our protection the most. I am slightly optimistic because when I wrote the very first draft of this report in November, I think it was, asking for job creation and investment and crying out over the dangers of youth unemployment were still very much seen as a left-wing idealism. Cute but unrealistic, a thing for socialists and greens perhaps, but not for anybody else to be concerned with. Meanwhile, Standard & Poor's, the IMF, and all kinds of leading economists have joined this call, and they are not exactly known for their left-wing idealism. While I thought my position would be very hard to defend, it seems that now the right-wing governments who are caught in their own austerity mantra are more and more on the defensive. So let's use that. I believe that Europe is strong enough to overcome this crisis. And the only thing that we need is a bit of solidarity between the centre and the periphery and between the haves and the have-nots. And for that solidarity, governments need to overcome their fear of Eurosceptic voters. And a message here, unions need to overcome their fear of Eurosceptic union members. I believe that definitely in some countries, union leaders are sort of the sort of leaders who look out the window to see a crowd passing and say, I need to find out where this crowd is heading so I can lead them there. Be real leaders with a bit of courage and a bit of care. We can get out of this crisis.